This is Steve Downs, the voice of Master Chief, Sierra 117, and you're listening to Podcast Unlocked, the world's #1 Xbox podcast. Now, finish this fight. Master Chief, out.
Welcome, everybody, to Podcast Unlocked. It's IGN's weekly Xbox show, episode 477 for January 12th, 2021. I'm Ryan McCaffrey. I've got the full crew assembled. Voltron, there's not missing any arms or anything this week. Miranda Sanchez, hello.
Hi, hello.
Destin Legary, good morning.
Bam, good morning, everybody.
Oh, that was a very, cheery band.
Bam! Good morning, everyone.
And happy New Year, Brendan Tyrell. We missed you last week, my friend. Glad to have you back.
Bam. Good morning. I don't have the energy Destin does, but hi. How is everyone?
Just keep chugging that coffee. I saw you
man.
a whole pot up there.
We're doing our good work over here.
That's a lot. Well, we are back in action. The Xbox year is back in full swing. And in fact, while last week was maybe a little quiet, I mean, we did have fun going over those 10 Xbox exclusives that are due out this year. The news is back in full swing this week, which we'll get to in a second. First, I wanted to mention real quick, if you are a fan of, or if you need a new Xbox Series X/S controller and the black or white's not for you, there is a new Pulse Red controller, which is red on the front, white on the back, cool buttons, and it's kind of really, I would call it the Super Mario themed Xbox controller. But it does look really good, so you can find that in stores now if you're interested in a new Series X controller. And then real quick as well, I wanted to mention Hitman 3 is coming up really soon, January 20th. That's one of what I would say two major releases this month. The second being The Medium, which is a next-gen exclusive for Xbox, Series X and Series S only. And that's out on the 28th. I told you about it. I had my preview for that last week. Well, this week, Friday, I got to post my preview of Hitman 3, and I super liked it. And I reviewed 2 a couple of years ago, and I think I gave it a 7 something, and it was good. But this, boy, I played Mission 1 3 different times in 3 different ways, and this really feels like a step forward. So if you need your stealth fix, as I do, and Splinter Cell continues to forsake us, Hitman 3 might be the game for you. Keep an eye out for that. And check out my preview on IGN or YouTube. All right, let's get right to it with the crew here. Destin, Star Wars games are not the only thing, which we'll talk about in a minute, that are going to be branded under this. But it's not just going to be Star Wars with the EA label on it anymore. Instead, they've resurrected the Lucasfilm Games label, which all of the Star Wars games are gonna go under. Lucasfilm Games is now the official identity, the press release reads, for all gaming titles from Lucasfilm, a name that encompasses the company's rich catalog of video games and its eye toward the future. What do you make of this, Destin? And what's your initial reaction to it?
I mean, it just seems like you have here written in the notes, and that's largely what I think. The EA exclusivity deal on Star Wars games is ending, and they're going to start licensing in a different way, right? So I'm not sure what that means. I honestly don't know. I saw this. It was one of our biggest stories, and I don't really get why it's a big deal. It's just Disney is taking back and bringing back the Lucasfilm Games logo to co-develop or work on Star Wars franchises again. So sounds great to me. I don't really know what to think about it. I don't have a strong reaction. Sorry.
But that's okay. I mean, I think a lot of people are it's a nostalgia play, number one, like that. And that's by design. It's getting people like me that remember the actual original Lucasfilm days. And it wasn't just Dark Forces published under Lucasfilm. It wasn't just Jedi Knight. It wasn't just X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. It was The Secret of Monkey Island, and it was Full Throttle, and it was these different point-and-click adventures and some Indiana Jones games, which hold that thought. We'll get to that in a second. But I do think, as you noted, I think it's probably laying the groundwork for the future where EA won't necessarily be the ones that are exclusively publishing Star Wars games. Because I've had a lot of people ask me this. The best I can find online is 2023, not 2033. That would be quite a long deal. But we've got another 2 years or so of the EA Star Wars deal, unless it got quietly extended, which I think if they were to have extended it, they probably wouldn't keep it quiet. That would probably be announced in the same way that EA announces every time they extend the NFL agreement for Madden. But I think this is probably laying the groundwork for the future. Brendan Tyrell, what's your take on the revival of Lucasfilm for the new umbrella here?
I'm kind of in Destin's camp with this, where I think it's smart, and I think you're right that it's laying the groundwork to retake ownership of Lucas-owned properties and basically everything Disney. I don't have a super strong reaction to it. I think it's cool that that brand is back, because I do remember it, but I never had a lot of familiarity with it when I was coming up in my video gamedom. So I think it's cool, and I do think it's laying the groundwork for them to work with a ton of other talented studios, as we might see soon. But yeah, it's a cool news story, but I it doesn't really hit too hard for me.
Miranda, will you tug on your heartstrings at all to see the Lucasfilm logo back on the box, or will it make no difference for you?
Yeah, I think more in line with you of the excitement of just the nostalgia of the point and click adventures, because those are something that I really love, and I feel like we don't have enough of those these days. So I would love to see them, of course, expand the opportunities that they have for different Lucas properties, because I think, if anything, this says to me, oh, you didn't forget about those other things you have in your catalog, as we will see in the next story, which we keep alluding to. And thank goodness they announced that before the show, because honestly, I think this would have been a little bit of a less interesting story without it. But I think the proof is already there in what they're trying to do with this, and say, hey, yes, Star Wars is very important to us. Obviously, when you think Lucas, you think Star Wars, but there are other things that come with that. And I think to make that name further, having this brand for their other games that they have coming is going to be a good point for them.
To your point, Miranda, just because I'll tell the audience this every week if we have to. Speaking of point and click adventure games, and you say we need more of them in the world. If our audience out there has not played one or more or all of these games, on Game Pass are 3 Tim Schafer classic point and click games, all remastered. They all look great, play great, sound great. Day of the Tentacle remastered, Full Throttle remastered, and that's my favorite Tim Schafer game ever. And Grim Fandango remastered, which is
my favorite, generally
regarded, yes, as the best of them all. I think I would recommend people start with Full Throttle. It's short. It's shorter than the others. It's hilarious, and it's also beautiful, even in whether you're playing with the remastered graphics or the originals. It was a very pretty game at the time. But if you just want to take the big bite and dive right in, then Grim Fandango could be the one you want to start with. Although Grim it's funny, but it's not as outright funny as the other two. But they are all excellent, and they're all on Game Pass. All right. What we've been alluding to is the sort of part 2, because what happened was at the beginning of the week, Monday, this got announced, the Lucasfilm thing. And then Tuesday, which is today as we sit to record, there was a much bigger and more surprising announcement of the first new game announced for the Lucasfilm umbrella. It won't necessarily be the first one that releases, because it's barely underway by the sound of it. But Indiana Jones is back in video game form, and it's from Bethesda, and specifically Machinegames, the makers of the phenomenal Wolfenstein first-person shooters, the revival of Wolfenstein that they have so expertly done over the last 5-6 years or so. And Todd Howard, the Todd father, he of Elder Scrolls and Fallout fame, will be executive producing this. So it'd be Machinegames doing the bulk of the day-to-day work, but Todd is going to be overseeing this. And Miranda, I'm going to go right back to you actually here. What do you? This was a big shock, was it not? That
yeah,
A, an Indiana Jones game, and B, that it's Bethesda.
game, yeah, Bethesda and Machinegames specifically, because like when I think them, I think awesome first-person shooters, right? Like we got Wolfenstein. I think I love your note about it's like obviously they really hate Nazis, so that's a perfect mix. But I was just like, oh, I wonder what this game is going to look like in their hands. And honestly, if we look at like the atmosphere and like just the scope of games right now, like Uncharted is kind of done in a way. Like they've sort of wrapped what that is. Tomb Raider's still doing its thing, and those were the two sort of adventure Indiana Jones-esque games, right? Like those.
You could probably argue, is Tomb Raider even still going at this point? Since
well, yeah, the last
you know
one
what
was.
I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to say. And
they
so
finished
honestly,
the trilogy, yeah.
right?
Yeah, and honestly, I thought maybe an obvious choice if they were ever going to do an Indiana Jones game, it would make sense to go with like Crystal Dynamics or even Naughty Dog if they were to like, hey, you guys want to do this cool property? But to do Machinegames, that's more exciting to me because I think they've already proven how they can make fantastic games, and this is their chance to say, here's another kind of story-based game, but maybe in a different perspective. Quite literally.
Now. Machine has up to date worked with id Tech, with id Software's Doom engine, the id Tech. id Tech, to my knowledge, has not yet been used for a third person game, but there's no way this would be a first person Indiana Jones game, right?
I have no idea what to expect from an Indiana Jones game. I'm actually kind of surprised that they would even align with that IP. When's the last time we got an Indiana Jones thing? Like,
Thank you.
Crystal Skull, right?
Well, the Lego games, Lego Indiana Jones.
Yeah, the Lego
which
games
were good.
I just like to think, what if they make the ride, like the Disney ride?
Yeah.
'Cause that's my favorite Indiana Jones thing, is the Disney ride.
It's so bizarre to me that, okay, great, Todd Howard's working on it, and like they have a killer team developing this. Indiana Jones, really? It's so 1990, 1980. Yeah.
They're shooting Indy 5 with Harrison Ford right now.
Are they really?
Oh yeah,
that
film is happening. It's the director of Logan.
Oh, okay.
Is behind James Mangold, I believe his name is.
It's going to be like an old man indie, you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, this is it.
I like Indiana Jones like as a character. I'm just like, is this still a thing that people are vying for? It's so left field to me.
Yeah, that was my exact reaction, Destin. I saw the news this morning and I was like, okay, that's awesome. That's cool. For guys like us, right? In our 30s. I don't know if Indiana Jones is like carries the same cultural weight for the younger generation, like to Miranda's point, I think the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland might be more of a cultural touchstone than Raiders of the Lost Ark or Temple of Doom, or maybe even the Lego games. It's such a strange. In the same way I look at Master Chief. Like for a long time, Master Chief was it, right? That was the Xbox mascot. But there's a whole generation who's never played like a quote unquote must play Halo game. So
do you guys?
I don't know. This is so weird. Go ahead.
Crystal Skull was my first Indiana Jones movie.
Oh no! Oh no!
Miranda,
that's not okay.
Despite what the movie says, you cannot climb into a fridge and survive a nuclear blast. That doesn't work.
Thank you for letting me know.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Indiana Jones, Miranda?
Like,
if Crystal Skull was your first entry into the series, like, do you have any sort of special connection with the Indiana Jones franchise?
No,
but that's also, I think maybe just to speak to, I can't speak for everyone who's maybe in a similar perspective to me, but I think that's maybe why I'm interested in it, because I think this is their chance to sort of like take what that franchise was or is and renew it in a way that makes it maybe more interesting.
The same way they did for Wolfenstein, right?
Exactly. I think there's ways to make old things relevant again, but with a new take. I mean, look at it. Like Sex and the City is getting rebooted. And that's only like 20 years old. But
they're making the third movie. They're not rebooting it, right?
Yeah. It's just
movie, not a reboot.
It's
and Samantha's not even in it anyway.
It's another movie without Kim Cattrall. Yeah.
I thought they were doing a show.
I think they wanted to, but Kim Cattrall put the kibosh on it. So now they're doing a movie with
Anyway, the point is too, I think there's a chance to make things new again in a way. And while that could be uninteresting, there is a way to make them interesting. And the reason I'm so intrigued is because it's Machinegames. That's why
absolutely.
I want to know what this is.
And I'm with you guys. And it's like, so showing my age here, id's engines, the old versions of id Tech, although they didn't call it id Tech back in the day, it was the Quake engine. But like the Quake engine was absolutely malleable, and there were third-person games made with it, even though it was originally conceived as first-person thing. So I do suspect that Machinegames probably will use id Tech for this, unless there's some extreme limiting factor of the current version of the engine. But they do have a lot of experience working on id Tech, so I suspect it'll be id Tech, which means it'll look good and run really well. Because that is, I think, if you look at the last two Doom games, it is a very, I think, I say as a layman who's not a programmer, not a video game expert, like in the production sense, it seems to be like a very efficient engine. It's like lean and mean. It looks good. It runs great. So I'll bet they are going to use id Tech. I'll bet they're going to make it third person, because I just can't see a first person indie game. I think that might be a bridge too far for this license. But fun fact that again, showing my age, going back to my early OXM days, we had a game come in. Well, actually, I'll just back up a tad. There was a developer called The Collective, and these guys earned a pretty good reputation for themselves because they made a third-person action-adventure out of Buffy. There was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer game for the original Xbox by The Collective that was really good. Like, it was just a game that, that was in the days, too, when most licensed games, like almost every licensed game, was bad. And this was a really good Buffy game. And then that developer in 2003 released Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, which is what's on the screen behind me. It's on the Xbox store. It's backward. It appears to be backwards compatible because you can just buy it off of the Xbox store. So there it is. It's it's a third-person game. And that game, Emperor's Tomb, was the last, what I would say, serious AAA big budget Indiana Jones game. There was one other one a few years later, which did come out on the 360, but it was primarily a handheld game. It was for DS and PSP, and it got a 360 port. And then we did mention the Lego Indiana Jones games, but those are kind of, those are their own branch of the tree. They're not like this was, where it's trying to be like a serious Indiana Jones action adventure. And the reason I bring that up, not only to illustrate all of your points about how long it's been since indie's really been in the pop culture spotlight in movies or in games, but also just a fun fact as we segue into the next portion of this discussion. That game, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb by The Collective, was a timed Xbox exclusive. It came out on the original Xbox on February 24th, 2003. And then it came to PC 1 month later, and then it came to PS2 in June. So it was about a 4-month timed exclusive console-wise from the last one. And that brings us to the obvious key question here. Because this is a Bethesda game, and Microsoft now owns Bethesda, will this Indiana Jones game be exclusive, completely exclusive timed-wise? Not at all. What do you guys think? I'm going to go to Brandon first on this.
Well, the real question is, are we going to get sued? Because we just showed about 30 seconds of Temple of Doom footage. I don't know the rules, but it doesn't... we'll be fine. I'm sure we'll be fine.
I'm sure we'll be fine. If not, it's our producer, John Borba's fault. It's not. Yeah. I take no responsibility.
John's on the hook. Yeah, my gut says it's probably not exclusive, but like we say, every time one of these stories comes up, right? I mean, for like 3 weeks last year, we talked about what this could mean about Bethesda exclusivity. There's just not enough real data to form an educated opinion on the situation. So my gut says it'll probably be multi-platform, right? Just because of all the different moving parts that are in there. And to bring up your great point that these deals take a while, and this was obviously in the works before the acquisition. That's not even final yet. So I imagine this is probably one of those games in the wave that still hits all consoles before Microsoft really puts the clamps down on games coming out of Bethesda as exclusives. But I will say that, if this hits Xbox and PlayStation 5, I'm sorry, Series X and PlayStation 5, I got to imagine like it's day one Game Pass anyway, right? So that's the same play that they run with most of their first party exclusives. So it doesn't really feel like you're missing much there.
Destin, how about you? Where do you weigh in? So we see where Brandon stands on this. What do you think? Exclusive, timed, not at all? What do you say?
I don't think this one will be exclusive. I think exclusivity will start coming into play around the time Starfield is released, whenever that is, because it's so far out that I don't think that they were obviously in development, but I don't think they were far enough where they would be concerned about not releasing it on a platform. So time will tell, but I don't think Indiana Jones is going to be the game because they have a trailer for it, and it seems like it's pretty close to being published. So not this one would be my answer.
We're going to talk more about Starfield later in the show, in the loot box, in fact. Now, Miranda, all right, so we've got a couple of votes here, and neither of your fellow panelists thus far thinks there will be any sort of exclusivity. How about you?
To the panel here, I don't think it'll be exclusive. Although I think we are expecting that to happen down the line, just as everyone else has said. Probably not this one.
And that is the $1 million question. So I agree with Brandon completely that I think the worst case scenario with this for Xbox players is that it will almost certainly be day one on Game Pass, which is a pretty good deal if you're an Xbox owner. Guess what? You don't have to pay 60 or perhaps even $70 to get this game. So there's that. But I know a lot of people out there would point to Spider-Man. What do you guys think of that? I mean, Spider-Man, kind of a similar deal where you had a platform holder and you had Disney, again, same corporate owner, and yet the PlayStation got Spider-Man exclusively. Destin?
I mean, are you talking about them getting Spider-Man with Insomniac or them getting Spider-Man with the Avengers game? Or just the Disney...
Well, no, Insomniac. Yes, Marvel's Spider-Man, the Insomniac games. Some people out there would say, well, why can't Indiana Jones be Xbox exclusive in the same way that Spider-Man is with PlayStation?
I mean, it could be, but I mean, if you're going to fight for an exclusive character, is Indiana Jones really the one that you're really worried about? Like Wolverine being exclusive to Xbox would be really cool, but like Indiana Jones, it just feels like a cross-platform game to me. Yeah. And like design-wise, they're probably just going to go like the Uncharted route, right? So
I hope not, man. I hope not.
Well, it's not going to be first person. That would just be we discussed that earlier. So
yeah, I agree.
It'll be third person. Like just based on the trailer, there's a lot of like little clues about exploring Rome and stuff in there. So that's really cool. But I just don't feel like this is the big plant our flag in the ground. We're doing exclusive games on Xbox now game that Bethesda is going to be launching with. It's for me, I'm like, all signs point to Starfield for that. It will not be indie. Could it be? Yeah. To answer your question, Ryan, though, could it be? Yes.
Yeah.
Will it be? I really don't think so. It just doesn't feel like the game to start it.
We're definitely going to talk more about Starfield in a bit. Yeah. Brandon, go ahead.
I think you also have to take into account the Spider-Man situation in that it was developed by either second party or first party, depending on when development started and whether Insomniac was acquired by then or not. And the more I think about it, the more I think like, I'm sure Disney has people knocking on their door saying, hey, we want to bring Spider-Man to a big video game. So maybe it was a situation of, the Marvel team looking and saying like, holy crap, Insomniac has something that's incredible. Yeah. This will definitely do Spider-Man justice. And if that's the case, then Sony owning the development studio with the big idea might make an easier case for that being exclusive. Again, I have no idea, but it just seems like everything kind of worked together. And they were like, well, yeah, I mean, you're going to make a great Spider-Man game. We don't really care where it is.
Number one, they could literally have shown them in the pitch meeting Sunset Overdrive, ironically. The Xbox exclusive to say, look, we can do this open world traversal with Spider-Man and make it really great. And number two, there is that business relationship with Sony on the movie side too, with the Spider-Man movies there. So it's probably not. I guess my point is it's probably not quite an apples to apples comparison.
That's my thoughts.
It's fair to bring up, but yeah, I think you make a good point.
You bring up Sunset Overdrive, and a lot of the technology created for Sunset Overdrive was later utilized in the Spider-Man game. And Insomniac has continued to refine that engine and technology that they've been building behind the scenes to improve the Spider-Man franchise. So absolutely, a game of the caliber that Spider-Man has showcased could be created on the Xbox platform. So not that anybody was doubting that, but just the fact that Sunset Overdrive, originally Xbox, has built the foundation to create something like Spider-Man is definitely something interesting, I think.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's saying it's a hardware thing. I think it's more just the people who have the know-how to do a good Spider-Man game happen to be owned by Sony, and the pitch came from them. Again, this is all speculation. Who knows? But
no, that's fair. And I'm going to make it actually 4 for 4. I'm with you guys. I don't think this will be an exclusive because I suspect, like Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop, also under the Bethesda umbrella, I suspect this Indiana Jones deal was made prior to the Microsoft acquisition. Now, does that mean things can't change? Of course not. Like, things could change. Deals can be amended. I think there's the best chance of exclusivity with Xbox on this Indiana Jones game would be like a 1-year timed exclusive, similar to what Ghostwire and Deathloop are doing. But I certainly think this indie game will come to PlayStation eventually. But I'm with you guys. I think it's probably going to just be a multi-platform game, but day one on Xbox Game Pass, which will be pretty darn sweet for Xbox owners. So instead of, PlayStation owners will have to fork over $60 for it, or again, maybe 70. But if you're on Xbox and you're a Game Pass subscriber, which we certainly recommend that you should be, you just download it and you're done, and you can spend your $60-$70 on another game. But
I will say that is such a big deal for me still. It's like, is it day one on Game Pass? Perfect. That's like the biggest thing I care about these days. It's like, is it on Game Pass? Do I really need to play it right now? Maybe later.
But yeah, Miranda, I want to just finish this by going back to your point. I think you made such an excellent observation because I'm with you that this was such kind of in a way, an unlikely pairing, Indiana Jones and Machinegames, that I, like you, am fascinated to see what they do with this. Given their track record of reinventing Wolfenstein, Indy has been gone from the video game scene. Again, yes, there's the Lego games, but arguably, like, Lego Indiana Jones was a Lego game first and an Indiana Jones game second. This will be a reimagining of what an Indiana Jones game is. We arguably haven't had a big Indiana Jones game since, as I said, Indy and the Emperor's Tomb from 2003. So by the time this game comes out, 20 years will have gone by between mainline, like, big budget AAA Indiana Jones games. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see this. And we do know, at the very least, it's going to debut at Microsoft's E3 press conference, whatever, or Microsoft stage somewhere in whatever, whichever show or event they choose to unveil it. But that'll be, it sounds like we won't get to see it for a while. The announcement said, hey, we'll talk more about this later, but for now, we're just excited to say it, to announce it, which to me said they didn't want it to leak. They wanted to get out ahead of any potential leaks on this, and more power to them for that. All right, next up this week, I don't know if you had a chance to check out this Bloomberg oral history of the original Xbox, which is a really fascinating read. I highly recommend everybody go check it out. But a little particular nugget out of there, which was probably my favorite section of what was a pretty long piece that interviewed a number of key people. I mean, there was you had Seamus Blackley, of course, in there, the creator of the original Xbox. You had some former Microsoft executives in there. Jay Allard, they got a hold of, which I tip my cap to because I've been trying to pin that guy down for an interview for years. I can't even get a hold of him. Anyway, check that out. But the part of it that's interesting to me is that back when Microsoft was first building the original Xbox, they tried to jumpstart that whole operation by making some big acquisitions, if that sounds familiar. Go figure, the history repeating itself, only more successfully now, because here are the names that Microsoft went after unsuccessfully. First, they went after EA. EA told them no thanks. They also went after Square, which I'll talk about in a second. They went after Midway, and then they went after Nintendo. So check this out. So the first company approached was EA, which, due to its dominance in the industry at the time, team members at Microsoft apparently called EA the Snow White to the rest of the industry's Seven Dwarves, which is a funny little anecdote.
High praise.
Yes, and then because that was before Activision had become a juggernaut. Yeah.
Excuse me. Thank you. Sorry.
I don't really get the analogy, but okay.
All right. We'll just keep moving, Dustin.
You see, she's the belle of the ball, and the rest of them are dwarves, literal dwarves.
Thank you, Brad.
They contribute in their own special way, but they're not as pretty as Snow White. More important.
And one of them likes to sleep a lot, and one of them's grouchy, and
sneezes.
So then Microsoft. So after EA, and this is according to the at the time head of business development, Bob McBreen, who was one of the people interviewed for this piece, he said, Steve Ballmer made us go meet with Nintendo to see if they would consider being acquired. That quote's actually Kevin Backus, who was the third-party relationship director. And Kevin says, they just laughed their asses off. Like, imagine an hour of somebody just laughing at you. That was kind of how that meeting went, end quote. And apparently they met more than once, with McBreen saying, quote, we actually had Nintendo in our building in January of 2000 to work through the details of a joint venture where we gave them all the technical specs of the Xbox. The pitch was their hardware stunk, and compared to PlayStation, it did. So the idea was, listen, you're much better at the game portions of it with Mario and all that stuff. Why don't you let us take care of the hardware? But it didn't work out, end quote. And then on the Square side, Square, that acquisition attempt went as far as Microsoft providing a letter of intent to buy the company, which, that's pretty far along in the corporate world. But then McBreen says the next day we're sitting in their boardroom and they said, our banker would like to make a statement. And basically the banker said, Square cannot go through with this deal because the price is too low. We packed up, we went home, and that was the end of Square. So, Miranda, do you feel bad for the Microsoft guys being laughed at for an hour in a room with a Nintendo?
Yes, I can imagine being those guys, and your boss says, "Hey, I know this is probably not gonna happen, but go do it anyway." And I know the dread of just having to go do something just because you have to explore the option. You know it's not gonna happen. There's the slimmest possibility of it happening. I think their idea, though, of maybe exchanging hardware with them would have been a good idea. Honestly, Nintendo still has a lot of hardware issues. As cool as they are, I think they do occupy a really interesting space in games as far as being innovative and very family friendly and having poor network conditions. But it is what it is. And I think Nintendo, if they would have worked more closely with Xbox, then would look so much more different now. Just imagine all those online Smash games you'd have.
Well, what's interesting is, again, this was January of 2000. So almost 2 years before the the original Xbox launched.
Oh.
And of course, history remembers that Sony also made a bid to partner up with Nintendo on hardware.
Mhm.
Nintendo rejected it, and that led directly to Sony making their own console. And then it kind of happened again. Microsoft went to them and said, hey, let's partner up on hardware. Nintendo said no, and then Microsoft ended up becoming a console maker themselves. So Nintendo, I think that's all we got to do is get if just go to Nintendo and say, let's work together, and then you end up making a console after it when they say no. But
I feel like there's a Dane Cook movie about that.
Dane Cook movie?
Yeah. He's the last person you date before you get married.
It's like I have this running thing where when my boyfriend gives me a Nintendo handheld, that means we're gonna break up soon, and I'm gonna keep it. But
the
bye.
writings on the wall.
The writings on the wall. Yeah, Nintendo's just ready for that. They're just ready for the splits and then success elsewhere.
Wait, do Nintendo systems just have bad memories attached to them for you?
No,
Okay, good.
it has Pikachu on the front. How could it have a bad memory?
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Destin, what about Square? I mean, because of course Square later went on to merge with Eidos.
Yeah.
And we have the Square Enix we have now, which, we had Hitman and Deus Ex under that umbrella on the Western side. And of course, they've continued to do Final Fantasy and a bunch of cool stuff on the Japanese side. And I mentioned at the top just briefly Midway too. Midway didn't quite work out, which at the time, a game you love, Mortal Kombat, was owned by Midway.
Yeah, and they've become NetherRealm since then, and Midway is gone. Midway doesn't exist anymore. So Midway made sense, and Square actually made a lot of sense. I'm kind of surprised that neither of them ended up working out, especially since we currently know the fate of Midway, and who is now owned by Warner Brothers, and Microsoft is again in talks about purchasing, or at least the rumors say, in talks to purchase Warner Brothers, which is currently owned by AT&T, which has since gone back and said we're going to retain the Warner Brothers, brand and everything for gaming. So yeah, those two are particularly interesting because I feel like the Square thing, you pointed out how close it was to an acquisition. I almost wonder if they would have went back to the table if that would have went through, and we would have a different reality. And then Square they had some good games, and they have a new Final Fantasy on the way, and they have a constant revenue stream, but they're nowhere near like an EA or an Activision or a Nintendo or any of the major brands. I think Square Enix they've had a little bit of a rough go of it, even with their major successes, in the years since this would have taken place. The Nintendo story is rather fascinating to me. I wonder if that says more about Microsoft's arrogance than anything, because it's just bizarre to me that they would send, because this is before the Xbox was a thing, right?
Right. Before. Oh, yeah.
So they don't even have a physical product to showcase what the Xbox can do. And they're going to Nintendo and saying, hey, we want to buy you. And Nintendo is basically like, they use the analogy with EA, but to not also have Nintendo in that realm is rather strange to me, especially during this would have been the N64 or end of the N64 era, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like that was like the console at the time, and Sony's sort of starting up their thing as a competitor. It's very, very strange to me that they would have went to Nintendo with this type of proposal.
But this was the Ballmer era, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we know anything about Ballmers, we know that man dreams big. Shoot for the stars. If you miss, at least you hit the moon. He went out and bought a basketball team after he left Microsoft. So, clearly he's not afraid to at least throw his hat in the ring. So
and like that try. If the worst they can do is say no, right?
So remember though, Sony and Nintendo just went through that whole thing also with the N64. So if you go back a little bit further, that didn't work out. Sony basically told them to F off, right? And then Microsoft comes in and they're like, no, why do these companies keep thinking we're going to partner with you? No.
How did you get this number? Are we listed somewhere?
And then it's to the point where they're like, oh, come on, guys. They invited us to Microsoft like in Seattle.
Right,
Let's go laugh at them again. We got to get a bunch of people to go again.
Yeah.
They're going to do it again, I promise you. Oh, here it comes. Okay, everybody laugh.
Don't laugh.
Well, funny how things kind of come full circle, huh? With Microsoft did eventually buy an entire major publisher 20 years later in the form of Bethesda. So they eventually got what they were looking for.
I don't think Nintendo, just like with their reverence in the industry and everything, they're never gonna sell to another company.
I would be so disappointed if they ever did. As I was saying kind of earlier, whenever we look at the console wars, whatever, I hate that, but it's always Sony versus Xbox, right? Like that's what it's like, PlayStation versus Xbox. Nintendo is always in its own little thing. It's its own little basket. And I think it's not that it doesn't get criticism, it's just that it's different in how it approaches gaming as a whole. And I think that's really special. And I wanted to see them do that, maybe with more powerful systems. But
I thought you were talking about the book console wars, which
no.
actually
Like
talks a
the
lot
general
about
fandom silliness.
You're totally right. Like they own a small niche. It's not even small. They own a sizable niche in the industry. At which point is it still a niche? I don't know. They do something that nobody else does. That's their territory, right? And I think the industry is better for that.
Agreed.
Well, check out the entire piece on Bloomberg.com. I think it was a really, really great piece there. Here's a really weird story that I think just kind of got out of hand. It's actually kind of a nothing story that turned into a story.
I hated that this was getting so much traction.
Well, Destin, please take it away. Go ahead here. I've done enough talking.
There was talk that Duracell and Xbox have an exclusive, so that's why Xbox controllers have batteries. Hello.
AA batteries rather than built-in rechargeables.
Oh, built-in rechargeable.
Is that a 1 or a 2?
It's a 2.
I love that you just summed up this whole thing in like 5 seconds. I love you.
Yeah, it was so frustrating to just see that get picked up because it's believable, right? You could actually come to that realization that, oh yeah, that makes sense. But no, it doesn't, because they build controllers that have built-in batteries. So it's just no.
Yeah.
Did you guys know you can also just plug in your controller without any batteries and it works?
Yes. Yeah.
That's all I play with most of the time, which is really actually my PC.
The Elite 1 still uses batteries. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Elite 2 went with the internal, but so it basically this was a quote from Duracell's UK marketing manager, a gentleman by the name of Luke Anderson, who was speaking to an outlet called Stealth Optional. I don't know what the context was, but the Duracell guy, Luke Anderson, says, "There's always been this partnership with Duracell and Xbox. It's a constant agreement that Duracell and Microsoft have in place. The deal is for OEM to supply, it's an OEM deal to supply the battery product for the Xbox consoles and also the controller battery. So that deal is going to go on for a while. It's been going on for a while, and I think it needs to go for a while more." And basically what happened was the internet, which is a completely sane and reasonable place where everyone always, acts rationally and thinks everything through before posting. Basically, people just ran with this, took his quote, like misinterpreted and took his quote out of context, and somehow thought that meant, oh, Duracell and Microsoft have a deal where Duracell's paying Microsoft so that there are no internal rechargeable batteries, and that's why the Xbox controllers use just, throwaway AA batteries, which, if you just stop for 2 seconds to think about that, it's dumb. And then Destin, thank you for holding up your Series 2 controller, in case for those of you listening on audio that didn't see on video, Destin just held up his Series 2. In fact, that's a regular Series S controller, but yeah, Destin's got his. And
no batteries.
They have a built-in controller with a built-in rechargeable battery. So this was all just sort of a ridiculous story, but I wanted to talk about it on the podcast just in case you've heard about this. And this is how, like, I mean, this is classic FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I'm not saying it was intentional. Sometimes FUD is intentional. It's just meant to spread misinformation. And sometimes it's just, you know, it's well-intentioned but goes awry. And this is one of those cases where if you heard about this, it's literally just a contract that, you know, somebody has to put batteries inside the Xbox boxes and the controller boxes, and Microsoft will sign a deal with somebody to supply those. It's Duracell, and that's it.
This story actually opened my eyes to, and it's a really good example of how we talk as gamers to each other about our preferences when it comes to controllers. Like, it seems like a lot of us like internal batteries, but when you expand that to the entire audience of millions of users, they have data that shows that a lot of people prefer batteries still. So, like, that is a thing. A lot of people still prefer that, and that is why the Duracell deal has, you know, continued, and they continue to choose to do it that way. So yeah, I mean, it's just sort of an interesting aspect to the story that I found coming out of the whole situation. A, people ran with a wild thing that's obviously untrue, and B, a lot of people really like batteries, which I did not expect.
It's hard to change the status quo, man. Like, batteries have been a staple in households for, I'm gonna say, generations, and that feels right.
I would say, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just trying to elaborate the point, but yeah, it's the way it's always been. It's the way why people still love physical media, right? It's why people don't want an always online console. It's just because it's the status quo.
Why people still have cable.
There you go.
Weird. It's weird to think about that. But also, I guess maybe somebody is weird to think about just using batteries. I will say too, like, there's options to have rechargeable batteries. Like, there are stand-ins, and I think the option itself is nice. So it's like, oh, I can still recharge this in some capacity, or like swap it out. But if you need those other batteries that are tossed, something you can just put in and toss, that's still an option.
Yeah, I mean, you buy a giant box of them from Amazon or Costco or whatever, and they're pretty cheap, and they last dozens of hours in the Xbox controller. I mean, that's
I literally just
two controllers, you know, so you can quick swap if you need to.
Yeah, I literally just did this over the holiday break. I got the rechargeable kit.
Nice.
And
there you go.
I got 20. I'm all messed up with this camera. I got a 24 pack of batteries. It was like $35-$40, something like that. Now it's just something I don't have to worry about anymore.
Doing this for ages. Great.
So there you go. That's the whole Duracell non-story, just in case it finds its way onto your timeline out there and you're like, wait a second, what? Now you know. All right. I think probably the last news story we'll do here is one that I suspect we might talk about for a little while. And Destin is already foaming at the mouth because it's about Mass Effect Legendary Edition. And we have a rumored release date. I didn't realize that was that funny. Is it?
No, just when you said that in Destin's expression, you could not look more bored. It was such a really funny way to do it.
Yes,
like,
I am so excited.
Please be excited, Destin,
Sorry.
for Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Not confirmed here, but we have a rumored release date of March 12th. This comes, so there was a release date from a Singapore retailer, and then Eurogamer basically corroborated it. So it's looking pretty good that this is likely accurate. March 12th, 2021, which is, in fact, it's January 12th as we record this, so exactly 2 months from today. Destin, what do you think of this release window? Is it a good time for this? And B, are you going to do another run through? And if so,
well, yeah, I mean,
are
absolutely.
you going to go Paragon Renegade? What is your philosophy for this? Because you've played this game more than anyone at IGN. You've played it many times, the entire trilogy. So I want to hear from you on this first.
And are you going to be FemShep this time?
No. And I thought about that a lot, and why I continue to play as male Shep. I'll probably do a FemShep playthrough, but my first one would definitely be male Shep. And I think it's because I have a connection to that character as like, that's how I identify with the Mass Effect franchise, with the male character, because I played through as him so many times. So it's a little bit, it's a different experience playing through with the lead who, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on her name. Miranda. What's the voice actress who did FemShep? Very famous.
Jennifer Hale? No.
No.
Oh, I'm blanking on it too. Now we're all, we're all
sorry, internet.
We're
I'm
all
blanking
frozen.
on it right
Did
now.
I not get that right? It was
Jennifer
Jennifer Hale. Yeah. Okay.
There it is.
Hale, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I thought so.
No, I heard crosstalk and I heard
Okay,
Ashley Burch and I was like, no.
No, not Ashley Birch, but yeah, Jennifer Hale.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about this edition. I'm curious about how they're going to address the Mako sequences, especially in the original. And like I've read the 2-sentence quote about how they're updating the game, and I'm really worried that this is just going to be like a 4K texture pack or a 4K update, because I can already play that on PC, right? So I truly hope that they modernize it in the way that we have always hoped. And one thing about the release date that I want to just reiterate, it says it's March 12th. That is a Friday. And oftentimes with retailers, there's 2 dates that they'll align with. They'll align with the middle week or the end of the week as a sort of generic just release date. And this has been a practice for retailers for, I don't know, I've been in the industry like 15 years and or something like that, and it's always been that way. So I don't know that this ends up being the final release date. What would make more sense is the 9th or the 16th, because that's a Tuesday, and Tuesday is typically release day. Or am I incorrect in that?
I mean, it's Friday is becoming a more common video game release date for sure. So I wouldn't necessarily read too much into that.
Though?
I think, especially for the spring season, you see more of those Thursday releases. So that is a thing that happens, which is like the Thursday midnight, but is the Friday release.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
not uncommon.
Yeah. The one thing that doesn't surprise me is a Q1 release. They said spring. So that's, I think it's like end of March until June or something like that. That's like the spring window. So I would be very happy if it did release in March. That would be potentially a good time for me to play through it. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, that's
with a newborn. I mean, yeah.
I think Brendan and I were talking about this off air at some point, and typically by now, a lot of big games have planted their flag in the ground and nailed down a release date in Q1. And a lot of times it's stuff that didn't make the fall. That's like, okay, well, we're going to be February this or March that. And I feel like because of the pandemic, and completely understandably so, the uncertainty and the delays that has caused game development and game production, that we just don't really have that this year. I mean, we have Hitman coming up in January, and we have The Medium at the end of January. But outside of that, there's really not a lot in the next couple months as far as big titles go. So, Miranda, I feel like this could be kind of a good time, like where there might not be a ton of other big stuff out. A good time to spend, 90 or 100 hours running through the trilogy again.
Yeah, as long as we don't have too many other surprises. Like, we still don't know what Nintendo's doing aside from their Mario re-release. Like, there's still a lot of things that are sort of up in the air as far as some of, I know the delayed games from last fall are falling into this time, which Mass Effect is technically one of those. I think it was like the intention or hope was that it was going to come out around N7 Day, and of course is not out.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I would assume it would be kind of weird if they didn't try to hit that. But I do agree that March is generally just like a great time to sink in dozens of hours into one specific game. I think we've seen it time and time again. I think if the one game that really evokes that for me is probably Breath of the Wild, because it was just one of those random sort of spring releases. And that's when we said, oh, hey, this is actually a great time for certain games to release at this point. And I think this is going to be a lot of first time for a Mass Effect for a lot of people. So I've had a lot of people even say that, oh, I never played, but this seems like it's a great time to try it out. And I hope that is true for a lot of people and that they'll have the time to, because it's fantastic.
One of the entries in the Mass Effect franchise, Mass Effect 2, came out on January 26th. And it's regarded as one of the best games ever made, So the fact that you can't have a major success during that window, during the Q1 window, it's just not true. And honestly, I wish more games would come out within that window.
Destin, you might remember better than I would, but I think Mass Effect 3 was a March release itself.
March 6th.
Wasn't it? Yeah. Thank you.
2012.
Yeah.
It has all the releases on this page.
Yeah, the first one I vividly remember was a November 2007 release, because like there were multiple 10 out of 10 video games that came out just for Xbox that year. November 2007 might be the greatest single month in Xbox history.
Yeah,
there was some incredible stuff, or at least just that season, that fall 2007, with Halo 3 and Rock Band 1 and Mass Effect, and I think a few others that I'm immediately forgetting about too. But anyway,
you know what? It's astounding to me if you look back at what the original Mass Effect was able to accomplish on an Xbox 360. It's astounding and almost inspirational. Yeah. Like if they were able to do that on a 360 around launch, like how many years out did Mass Effect come? Or it was like within the first year, right, Ryan?
Well, no, it was basically at the second anniversary of the console, effectively, because it was November 22nd, 2005 was the 360 launch. So it was the end of the second year.
Yeah. And I've been largely wondering, like, if that would have come out today, would it still be regarded as highly, or would we be tearing apart the walking animations and the frame rate stutters and the texture pop-ins?
It would have been a different game if it came out today.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, like, let's say a game like Mass Effect launch and it had some of the problems that the 360 had. I'm just wondering if it would have been as celebrated. It's just something that's been on my mind lately about games, just in general, and how we kind of tear them apart if there's anything wrong with them. Even Last of Us 2, which is many people's game of the year. Remember how controversial that was leading up to launch and then even after launch?
Well, that was more of the controversy, and I'm using air quotes for anybody listening on audio, was more about the content rather than any technical aspects. You know, that was not a cyberpunk situation where it was because that was Mass Effect 1 too, where, you know, the long elevator rides, the frame rate wasn't super great, some of the animations, but yeah. Brandon, did you play did you rock the trilogy in the day? Are you going to run this again?
Man, keep moving.
I
am not a Mass Effect, but I did play one.
Isn't The Witcher 3 like one of your favorite games ever? So you love Western RPGs. This one just doesn't do it for you?
It's the sci-fi elements for it. I'm not a huge sci-fi guy. I appreciate it. I really do. But I don't appreciate it enough to want to like really dive into that universe. You know, I'd much rather take a fantasy RPG and like get to know all the different elements of that than dig in with Mass Effect. But what I played from the first one, I really enjoyed, and I think I finished it. I got to the end. I don't want to spoil anything.
No, don't. Yeah.
But I got to the end and I was like, holy crap, that's a great story. And then 2 came out and I dabbled and it just wasn't for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. I mean, that's like, I'm the same way with, I definitely lean fantasy myself. Like I love Elder Scrolls. I like Fallout. So that's, I kind of relate to that.
And that's why they make both, right?
Right.
The bookends of the first game, storytelling wise, are just so damn good.
They're strong.
I don't think any of the Mass Effects since have been able to touch the story of the first one. I really, truly adore the story of Saren and how they handled the storytelling of the characters. Sorry.
And your goal and your quest to become, you know, who you become is just so good. And for me, the first one, especially compared to the second one, I know a lot of people love 2, and I like 2 a lot. For me, I'm a Mass Effect 1 guy. That 1 felt like a space opera to me, which I think is what they were going for, where it felt big. It felt, you know, this, as you guys said, the story is phenomenal. The Citadel felt like an enormous place where the universe really would come together. In Mass Effect 2, they literally reduced the Citadel to like 2 rooms, like 2 big rooms. that was one of the changes for 2 I really didn't care for.
I mean, they probably had data on that, right? Like, what's
Maybe
that
not
weird?
back then. I don't know. I'm not sure how much telemetry they would have had in 2007.
Yeah, but I mean, anecdotally speaking, I fall into the same thing, even when it is fantasy, right? Like, what was the game with Kurt Schilling's 38 Studios? It was Kingdoms of Amalur.
Yes.
Dude, amazing author, great storytelling, gameplay was fun, but like walking from point A to point B, there's about 12 different NPCs and they all have 17 pages of dialogue. And I got to a point where it was like overwhelming, you know? And for people who really do like to like explore all the nooks and crannies, like an area can be too large in size, right? And too much to do, too many things to see. You get, I don't know, you get anxious, you get overwhelmed by it.
So I will say it about the Mass Effect games. Like the first one, I think, is regarded as the best story, like as a overall encompassing, whereas 2 is so much more about the characters. And I think that's where Mass Effect really excels. Like you find these characters, and some of them, and there's a handful of them that are my favorite characters of all time, just from Mass Effect, because they're that good. And then 3 is kind of like the culmination of everything, with, I think, gameplay is like the best it is. At least for me,
right.
I thought it was the best.
Yeah, the loyalty missions in 2 are, I think, better than the overall plot.
I agree.
Of 2.
The overall plot of 2 is a little weak.
It's kind of bad, and like even 3, 3 still, of course, is it's got the reputation with the ending. But for me, okay, even if you didn't like the ending of Mass Effect 3, the events leading right up to the ending, which again I won't spoil, I think were great. Like that whole sequence heading towards the finale was phenomenal. And yeah, I can't wait to see this in 4K and running smoothly. Because Destin, you reminded me, I hadn't thought about it in years, but Mass Effect 1 probably ran at like 20 something frames per second on the 3.
It did not run smoothly, not at all. And
it was a gorgeous game. Don't get me wrong. It was a next generation. It was Unreal Engine. I think that would have been Unreal 2.5 at that point, and it was gorgeous. But yeah, it definitely pushed the 360 to its limit technically.
My last playthrough was when they sort of enhanced it on the Xbox One, I believe. That's the last time I played through the trilogy, and there's definitely improvements. To your point about the ending, that was really hard for a lot of people. I think they really wanted to see an ending where it was much more unique per the choices that you made through the franchise. Sure. And the whole palette swap thing, it was really frustrating to see, because we had been told all of your choices are going to matter at the finale of this. And BioWare seemed to run into a problem where, like, well, how do we actually do that logistically?
Right.
And when you start thinking about, like 150 dialogue choices and different outcomes, developing for that also like is tremendously challenging. So that was another aspect that they would have had to deal with at the time.
Well,
it's truly it's just a fascinating trilogy, and it will always hold a special place in my memories. And I'm really excited to play through Legendary Edition, regardless of if it's good or not.
I'm with you. I mean, they're really, say what you will, however you feel about the Mass Effect trilogy, but it really was a game design and storytelling experiment that I think at a scale of which we haven't really seen in video games. Like, I mean, The Witcher, each of them are these giant, wonderful open world role-playing games, but they don't, like, Mass Effect tried to tell this continuous story arc across a trilogy, with each game being 40 plus hours, where, as you said, your choices would matter, and you could play it, you could be good, you could be evil. And we maybe haven't seen anything like that before or since.
I mean, Dragon Age does it, right? 1 through 3.
Yeah,
but it's also
not
BioWare, so.
Mass Effect does, yeah.
Dragon Age Inquisition, I think, was the last one that was, at the time, a little bit controversial, but longer term, I think a lot of people were really, really receptive to the storytelling in Inquisition and the options that, you wound up being able to choose. I don't think Anthem hit the right note with people. I've recently just started playing through that again. They never recaptured that magic, not even with Mass Effect Andromeda. Yeah. It's not. Yeah, I don't know. I have hopes for Mass Effect 4, and I also have concerns. I'm like, without Drew, outlining the story from start to finish, without the key storytellers. Yeah, I'm sure Mac Walters is still there, but he came on for Mass Effect 2 and then finished up the trilogy with 3, and then did the DLC, which is largely cagey. It's just going to be, are they going to be able to recapture that magic with 4? Because largely they've been struggling with that, and now Casey's gone, and the writer of Dragon Age Inquisition is gone. So
we'll see. I mean, super producer John Borba throwing out KOTOR, also BioWare, also the Mass Effect team.
Also written by Drew Karpyshyn.
That's also where they started that, right?
That was one game. Yeah, I'm talking about like KOTOR, Mass Effect was a 3-game arc, so it's just never seen anything like that. So, all right, let's move on to the loot box. I promised we'd talk about Starfield some more, so let's hear from Bradley in England.
Hi, Bradley here from England. Last week you spoke about the Xbox exclusives coming out this year. My question is about the ZeniMax studios, and whether you think that any of those studios will launch anything this year exclusive to the Xbox platform. And also, what do you think the likelihood is that Starfield is A, coming out this year, and B, will be exclusive to the Xbox ecosystem? Thank you.
An excellent and relevant topic for this week's show, as it worked out. In fact, I had that loot box question picked out a while ago, and then the Indiana Jones thing happened, so that worked out swimmingly. Miranda, Starfield, when and are they going to rein that one in as an Xbox exclusive, do you think?
Says next year at the earliest. I think especially with the pandemic and how we've seen it impact game development, we've seen developers talk about the challenges that they go through with, being remote. If there was even a hope for it being this year, I think that was probably just not going to happen. And given reception of recent Bethesda games, I think they do need to make sure that this game is really a quality release that is a solid first entry, and potentially it could be a new IP for them, right? Like a big new series, of course, new IP, but bigger new series and not just a one-off game. So they want to make sure that they really get this right. So I would say 2022 at the earliest. I think there's a good chance that it could be exclusive. I know we've gone back and forth on it all the time.
Yeah,
but
Brandon, where do you land on this one?
I mean, Miranda's 100% my opinion. So what she said. I think that they are way too cautious, and rightfully so, coming off of 4 and then Fallout 76, and there's been too many missteps that I think they are going to take it very slow. And now, especially, they have the backing of Microsoft. They don't have to rush it, right? So I don't think it's this year. I don't know if it's next year. But Miranda's 100% right, where if they don't knock the first game out of the park and start that new franchise and create that need for more, the way that Mass Effect 1 hit Destiny, then what are they doing, right? So
great point.
Yeah.
And you think Xbox exclusive on this one?
I don't know. Again, this question, I hope we don't have to talk about it every week until 2023. I don't know. We'll see. If there was a candidate for an Xbox exclusive, I think Starfield would be the earliest one. But again, we just don't know because we haven't seen what their publishing strategy is like yet.
Destin, real quick, where do you stand on this one?
At a bare minimum, Starfield will have exclusive content similar to what Destiny had for the PlayStation when Destiny came out. Exclusive, let's pretend it's like a Destiny game. Exclusive strikes and exclusive weapons, exclusive things on the Xbox platform. That's basically a given, and Microsoft has basically said as much. As for my opinion on to whether or not it will be an Xbox exclusive, I do think it will be an Xbox exclusive.
And I'm with you to finish this up. I think the Elder Scrolls is much further away, and that's good. We've already discussed that one a lot. Starfield is a new IP. There are no preconceived expectations of platform or of anything, and it is a new IP, potentially a new franchise from Todd Howard and his team. I think it's the perfect game that even if it was previously planned for PS5, as I'm sure it was, I think this is the one where Microsoft says, no, this one we're going to use to bring in some new people to the Xbox ecosystem. I think I would be shocked if this game ever came to PlayStation 5. And as for when it might come, I mean, they have been working on it for a while. Remember, it's been a long process. I mean, you guys are totally right about needing to take all the time they need to get off on the right foot, particularly pandemic. And now they've got the extra security of Microsoft, as Brandon, you mentioned. Now with Fallout 4, they did what seemingly worked very well for them, which was announce it right before E3, show it at E3, and then ship it that fall, that very short hype window. You would think, well, maybe they'll try to do that again for this, which means if it is a 2022 game, we won't even hear about it again until next year. I think they're gonna announce it this year. There have been little leaks about it. They have addressed it before. I think this is going to be a game that we see. This is going to be one of the big moments of Microsoft's E3 or whatever their summer, showcase press conference is. So I think we will see it announced this year, even if it's not out until next year. Bradley, thank you so much for your Yappa question. And I invite all of you to submit your video question for the panel, the loot box. You can do that by going to the Unlocked 477, this episode's article page on IGN. Scroll down and right in the comments section, just above that, you'll see Yappa. Leave a Yappa comment. It's very easy. So log in with Facebook, Discuss, LinkedIn, or Google, or if you want to make a Yappa account, you can do that too, but the point is you don't have to. And leave us your question just as Bradley did, and you might be featured on an upcoming episode of Podcast Unlocked. All right, quickly, let's get to the Unlocked Block Trivia. This is going to be like rapid fire because we are about out of time. But since we're all here, I want to get started. We got a fresh new year. Alec, whose gamer tag is Danzinator410, asks, during the 360 generation, it was common for Xbox 360 games to require multiple discs. And he's certainly right about that as the generation wore on. He says, which of these games during its first release, so not any kind of re-release with extra content or anything, which of these games during its initial release shipped with only one disc? So you have 3 multi-disc games here and 1 single-disc game. Name the single-disc release. Was it Batman Arkham City, Assassin's Creed 3, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, or Halo 4? I'm going to go, let's see. Brandon's our champion from last year, so I'm going to go to him last. I'll go Miranda's Way first on this.
She could have been in first. He won last time. We gets the honor of going first for the rest of the year.
How dare you?
For the rest of the year.
I don't know. I honestly can't remember.
I also don't know either.
AC3 is Black Flag, right?
No, it's
AC3 is the Revolutionary War.
Thank you. Yes.
Great.
Starred Connor. He parkoured.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to go with AC3. I'm not going to give my explanations because I don't want to help out Miranda.
We're going quick anyway here.
I conned you into answering before me. Anyway, I actually don't know this either. I'm going to go because I want to be different. I'm doing different. I don't remember this, but Batman Arkham City?
Okay. Destin, that leaves you. Do you want to go with one of the other two or go your own way here?
I did 3 of these guides.
I know.
I did AC3 IGN first and the video walkthrough for it. Really buggy at the end. I did all of Arkham City. I worked on Halo 4 with Miranda.
Okay, so here's the answer.
I wasn't an IGN.
Metal Gear. Oh, I'm going Halo 5 then. Yeah.
What are you going with, Destin?
I'll say this is so tough. I'll say AC3.
Okay. All right, so
don't just ride my coattails. Think for yourself.
Miranda, you've won this week. Congratulations, Batman Arkham City. 1 disc. Everything else was 2 discs. Great work. Great question from Alec. If you want to try and stump the panel, I am in need of a refresh of some good Xbox trivia questions. Nothing too obscure, but something that somebody would have a reasonable chance of knowing or trying to think through. As I think, Alec, that was a good question there. So you can email in your trivia question to unlocked@ign.com.
Terrible question.
Your name, your question, the multiple choice, 4 multiple choice answers, and please note the correct answer in your email. So great job, Alec. And with that, we will hit the road. Again, my plug for this week is my Hitman 3 final preview. I played it on PC. Haven't played it on the Series X yet, but it's really fun. Check out my final preview on IGN or YouTube, and you can find me on Twitter at DMC_Ryan. Brandon Tyrell.
Hey, you can find me on Twitter at Brandon Tyrell. I have nothing to plug. I'm not working on anything that you can see right now, so stay tuned, I guess, is the only thing that I can say.
Sounds good. Destin.
You can find me on Amazon.com/baby registry. No, I'm just kidding. Twitter.com/Destin. Is it just Destin? Jeez, whatever. Just Google my name and look for whatever you're looking for. It's not going to matter for like the next 2 months anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you're on the show next week, but if not, we will understand and certainly congratulate you and your lovely
We're
wife.
past 37 now, so anytime.
Miranda, take us home.
Yeah, you can find me at Notes Havoc with a K. Pretty much anywhere. I don't have anything big to plug. Just use IGN guides, and I guess also tonight I'm starting Psychonauts on my personal Twitch, and that's of course Havoc Rose, because I figured if I don't remember Psychonauts, probably a good chance other people don't. So let's all remember it together, and I'm going to play it. Also, here's Ari, because everyone liked seeing her last week. So thank you guys for the Ari shout-outs.
Yes.
Fluff. Here she is.
You stream, so not everybody listens to the show right away on Tuesday. So for future reference, do you do your personal streams on which days? Tuesday?
Yeah, I do game stream weekly on Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. PT. And then I do a late night Thursday stream for just chill indie games, which is really cool. So going through a bunch of different things that you may not have heard of. And then Sundays, at 11:30 a.m. PT, I stream Stationary, which is extra fun.
That's my favorite.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, great stuff. Everybody, great work. Great to see all of you. This was Unlocked 477. We shall return in just 1 week's time.